Good morning, my friends. This is the Grim Flayer. Hope you're all doing very, very well today. Playing some more Golgari again. I know that will shock you, but I am still playing Golgari. Love this deck, and we are here with a pretty slow hand on the draw. I think it's a keep. Again, game one, when we're on a fair deck, we don't know what we need in the matchup necessarily, besides lands and spells in a somewhat balanced ratio. When we have that here, it's a little too heavily balanced toward the land, of course, but we have two ways to potentially turn excess lands to good use. We can escalate with brutality, we can take up the Lily and have some relatively free pitches. Also, the fact that we lack a turn one play is mitigated by the presence of a Quagmire. So I am happy to keep this hand in the dark, and our opponent is also pleased with their 7. It's going to be Polluted Delta and pass. Alright, Delta is a really, of course, wide-ranging fetch. It's not as narrow as something like Windswept Heath might give us more of a signal here, but Delta could be anything. That said, we're going to rip a Thoughtseize off the top. That's a great draw, so we're going to see what our opponent's up to. Alright. They are some kind of blue-red control deck. That's all we can tell for now. Harvest Pyre is an interesting one. So, this is basically a way for red decks to remove big creatures without having to 2-for-1 themselves. So that tells me that they're not Jeskai, and they're probably not even Grixis. They are probably just straight blue-red. I have a video up on the channel. It's one of my first videos with this deck, and it's against Blue Moon, and they played a card called Flame Slash, which fills a similar role. Yeah, if you're playing red, and the decks like ours with Tarmogoyfs and with Tassigers and things like that, you've got to dip into some unusual cards if you wish to be able to 1-for-1, oversized creatures. So, yeah, we're going to take Snapcaster Mage, though. Even though Harvest Pyre, again, is kind of built for decks like ours, Snapcaster still represents the best value. And Snapcaster can also, Snap Bolt can take a big creature off if the Snapcaster is able to block. So, Reduke, our champion of the BGX archetype and one of the absolute best players of all time, has a rule of thumb. If you're not sure, take away the Snapcaster Mage with your discard spell, because we are in it for the grind. Snapcaster's a 2-for-1. So while I was pretty sure there that Snapcaster is the clear choice, even if I was a little bit hedging toward taking away one of the other spells, the Reduke way says, hey, take the Snapcaster when in doubt. Now, they're going to top deck a Sulphur Falls. I understand why they played it there, but it's still kind of nice for us because we know their hand. And because we know their hand, we are not pressured to Inquisition right now. Collective Brutality right now is actually perfect. I do not expect them to bolt us in response, and they don't. That's pretty nice, because then we are free to take away the bolt. Now that Harvest Pyre is stranded in their hand, they can't even get the value that Bolt could have gotten them in response to our Inquisition next turn if we play it. That said, we might be just looking to jam the Liliana as well. So ripping all this discard off the top has certainly been very, very nice in this matchup. We draw Blooming Marsh. Okay, so that's a less good draw, but we're still happy to run it out and just try the Lily. So unless they top-decked Logic Knot or Monoleak, and they did not, Lily resolves. She is obviously so good against control decks. Overgrown Tomb is our worst land here. We're going to pitch that. Hissing Quagmire, of course, has the ability to start getting in. And Verdant Catacombs is nice for Tireless Tracker. They will pitch a Polluted Delta. They'll play an island. And they'll pass. Alright. So we're going to lead on the Inquisition here. partially just for information in terms of sequencing our turn, and partially because we don't want to give them the ability to pitch Harvest Pyre for free to Liliana. I think at this point, even getting a land out of their hand is better than the Harvest Pyre. So we will take away the Harvest Pyre, though, because that's better than Roast. Roast is even more clunky because they cannot hit our manlands with it. So they've got a couple cards that they've seen that are kind of designed for decks like ours, right? Once again, there are ways for a blue-red deck to 1-for-1 creatures that get bigger than X3. But our specific progression, involving a lot of discard into Liliana, means that those cards are actually proving to be quite poor for them at the moment, anyway. We'll play a Quagmire. We'll pass. We hold up Trophy. You know, so if they rip like a Jace off the top, we can hit that. But looks like they're just gonna pass. We're not interested in shocking there, and we are pretty clearly taking up the Liliana no matter what happens. So we might as well just kind of cycle our Trophy here, take them off of a red mana. There is one and only one way we get punished here, and that is if they have Cryptic Command to bounce our Liliana in response. I don't think we can play around them ripping a Cryptic off the top, because that's a very, very good draw anyway. No matter how we sequence, it's going to be problem for us. So I think we just need to be ruthless here, use our spells as efficiently as possible, take up the Lily, and make them have something. Ooh, Thing in the Ice goes by the wayside. Interesting. I don't know. I'm no expert on the blue-red decks, but if I were them, I might have just run that out. Just force Lily to Edict, potentially. Buy yourself some time. Yeah, now they just have to run out of land, and they have the Roast stuck in hand. That said, they know we're BGX, they know we have Fatal Pushes and Trophies to kill the thing, so... But just, yeah, I think they overvalued the Roast there, right? The Roast is just going to be dead in hand because we know about it. We're not going to run anything out into it. We just have no need to. So, regardless, we are in a very, very strong position no matter what they chose to do. We even get to start clocking for 2. And we even got to be a little greedy and tick the Lily up. I say greedy, it's really not, because now even their best draw of Cryptic Command, all it does is reset the Lily. They'd pretty much have to main phase it here because we're going to ult next turn. They have a Blood Moon. Alright, so it's a blue-red thing in the moon deck. Fine, fair enough. So what do we do here? We could tick up again, but then we lose our Thoughtseize, which doesn't feel that bad because it's pretty dead when they're in top deck mode, but I think we're pretty safe to ult here. So here was my logic. Getting the Blood Moon off the table is fairly important just because it's going to turn off our manland and turn off some other of our draws, at least to some degree. I like doing it this way, and here's why. So if they keep all of the islands, they no longer have red mana, so half of their draws are dead. They need to hit more lands to make those draws not dead, and hitting more lands is, of course, very bad for them. Then we'll get to start taking the Liliana back up. If they keep the Blood Moon in the red land, of course, we just quadruple Stone Rained them, and they're off of blue. Either way, our Thoughtseize is potentially live next turn if we ult now. So I really like ulting here, and I like this split even though it looks a little bit weird. Let's see what our opponent likes to keep here. Wow, they're going all in on the Blood Moon. I kind of expected them to keep the islands, but in a way I kind of understand this. But yeah, they're gonna look at one card and then they're just gonna scoop because we're pretty far ahead. Next turn we could have hit the Thoughtseize, we take the Lily back up, either one or both totally fine, and then we're just Lilying them out of the game. They need to hit several land drops probably to become relevant again. So anyway, really interesting game in my opinion, even though it wasn't very close, because it just shows a couple things. It shows the deck building cost for a deck that's straight blue-red, right? They have to play cards like Harvest Pyre and Roast. They are specifically a nod to decks like ours, and they even proved to be clunky and dead here, and eventually just had to shed them to the constant Liliana grind. Obviously, we had a pretty nice hand for the matchup. We had some natural protection against Blood Moon. We obviously ripped a couple discard spells off the top early that were really nice complements to our Liliana. So I feel like a lot of the games that I end up showing on this channel are ones where Tracker runs away with the game, and we grind them out, and it's great. That's certainly kind of the ethos of the deck in action, right? But I wanted to show the kind of other side of the deck where sometimes you just rip apart their hand, you just pressure them with Liliana, and that just wins you the game. We did not see a creature the entire game. We didn't draw one, we didn't play one. We fired up a Quagmire exactly once and got in for 2 damage. That is it, and we were just too far ahead, they couldn't come back. So, the power of discard and the power of Liliana, I wanted to give it its due on this channel alongside the power of our super grindy cards, and hey, this was a great example of it. So let's go to the sideboard. We're against Thing in the Moon, if you want to call it that, so we have to plan around both cards, plus see how we would side against control in general. Alright, my friends, we are here siding against blue-red Thing in the Ice, and we've got a few options here for sure. Nile Spellbomb's an interesting one. I think I expect Snapcaster Mage to at least some degree. That said, I'm sorry, we don't just expect it. We saw it game 1. It was what we took with our opening Thoughtseize. That said, they certainly have some progressions like Thing in the Ice into Blood Moon, into a flurry of spells that just don't use the graveyard and can just win the game. So, in my opinion, we start out by saying 1 comes in and 1 is in the maybe board. Engineered Explosives we're not too interested in. It can kill Thing, it can kill Snapcaster, but they're still not presenting all that many permanents. Interestingly, it can kill Blood Moon if they have a Blood Moon giving us red, and we already have access to both of our colors, but if we have access to both our colors, Blood Moon's not that big a deal. So, as cute as this is, it does have some application, but we just don't have enough that's bad in the main deck to want to bring in something like that. Golgari Charm, I'm going to say maybe. Killing Blood Moon is good, but I rate the killing Blood Moon aspect of this card higher in matchups like Panza and RX Prison than I do against Blue Moon variants, because against Blue Moon variants, they're not going to cheese it out on turn 2 or even turn 1. Now, granted, that's still hard to hit with Golgari Charm when we're on the draw, when they do that in those other decks, but still, they're more all-in on Moon there. I don't really want to get tempoed out of the game by counter magic and Thing in the Ice with a Golgari Charm rotting in my hand. So it's still worth considering. It kills Snapcasters too, in case that matters. Regen is also live. But it's more of a maybe board card than a for sure card in this matchup, in my opinion. Maelstrom Pulse, also a maybe leaning toward no. They're going to play Jace. It kills Moon, it kills Thing, but again, we just have not that much to come out, as you'll see when we look at the main deck. Same thing with Fulminator. I hate to just say maybe, but he's maybe. In fact, leaning toward no, because the Blue Moon variants play a ton of basic islands, right? So we're not really doing all that much to them in just a 2-color deck, hitting a non-basic only. We're not making their Blood Moons any worse, and, you know, I can see a world in which this comes in, but I also just don't think we're going to want it at the end of the day. Choke, on the other hand, is completely fantastic. They are more vulnerable to Choke than just about any blue-based control deck, in my opinion, because they're not like blue-white control, where they're playing a great deal of blue-whites, or blue-X sources. In this case, it would be blue-red. In blue-white's case, obviously blue-white, that are non-islands that make blue. Like blue-white has Glacial Fortress, Celestial Colonnade. Even some decks play a one-of Temple of Enlightenment, random cards like that, Mystic Gate. I don't expect any of those out of Blue Moon because they're playing around their own Blood Moons. So they have fetches, they have shocks, and they have basics, and probably not too much more than that. They're going to fetch a lot of basic islands specifically early on, and that's where Choke gets them. So Choke is even better here than it is against your average blue control deck. I like Nissa Vital Force as a potential inclusion. She's a little clunky against their kind of 2-mana counter spells for sure. She's double green against Blood Moon. All of these things are bad. That said, it's a control deck. It's grindy matchup sometimes. We might want access to her. No to Baloth. We already said no to explosives. We don't need our Wrath effects. We don't need Kalidas. We don't need Surgical Extraction. This is a value matchup. They have not showed us the combo, and I don't expect them to be playing Thing in the Ice and Blood Moon and the Through the Breach combo. It's usually pick two, in my experience, but if they're absolute madmen playing all three, I could see a world where we want to bring Extraction back for this sideboard Game 3, but for now, Game 2, we're going to leave it out. I like Brutality and Duress. Neither is perfect here. Duress is going to whiff on Thing in the Ice, which is its big miss relative to most control decks. That said, it's still a definite inclusion. Hitting Blood Moon, hitting all their usual control stuff is great. Hitting Planeswalkers is great. Brutality is actually more of a maybe because it doesn't hit Moon, doesn't hit Walkers. So we have a lot of cards that are borderlining on inclusion, but for now, we've got 6 maybe board cards and only 3 definites. So what do we not like? Well, we like it all. We really like it all for the most part. Even Fatal Push is usually a pretty free cut against control. It's a lot more appealing here. We've seen Thing in the Ice and we've seen Snapcaster Mage. They might play cards like Vendilion Click too. Fatal Push is going to have a fair amount of targets. That said, this is where our catch-all answers really shine, right? So we have 6 copies of these cards in the main that can answer Thing in the Ice. They can answer Snapcaster if we really need them to, although obviously that's not great. And they can answer Planeswalkers, and they can answer Blood Moon. These cards really, truly shine against decks like this, where they play enough, like their permanents are what win them the game, but they don't play so many that you want to be overloaded with removal for them. If you're trying to hedge against a Thing, Moon, Planeswalker deck without these cards, like if you're a non-green mid-range deck and you're trying to play the right combination of like Fatal Push and, you know, if you're red, maybe burn spells to kill the Planeswalkers and what can kill, you know, Blood Moon, and it's just a mess. So having access to this stuff is great, and that means even though Fatal Push is fine here, we are pretty okay with cutting 3. Because everything else is good. Our threats are all good. Tarmogoyf outgrows their burn spells a lot of the time, even their Harvest Pyres, and Roasts can struggle to answer it if we've put some Planeswalkers and enchantments into the yard. It can get to be a 5-6, even 6-7 in this matchup. Scavenging Ooze is great against a Snapcaster deck. Just another threat in general. Obviously, Tracker for the grind. Taziger is wonderful against Blood Moon decks that grind. Our Planeswalkers are great. Our discard is great. And this stuff's all great. We just don't want to bring out too much more. So this is a totally fine 60. Just a very conservative sideboard of 3 cards in, 3 Fatal Pushes out. Now, that said, we have a lot of reasonable maybe board cards here. Brutality is already, I guess, one of the more borderline cards that remains, strangely enough. That's how good our main deck is situated against something like this, so we'll say no to that. we'll say one spell bomb is fine. We don't need to go all in. Yeah, Fulminator is borderline enough that I say no, and we already have access to enough of this type of stuff here. So the major question is, do we want Nissa? The answer is probably yes. We have enough, the stuff we brought in is all low curve, really powerful, either hosers or early game forms of interaction, at least ones that can be resolved early. So with that in mind, I'm pretty comfortable cutting away the 4th Fatal Push to bring in a gigantic bomb. And I really, truly like this 60 here. You could say we want a Fatal Push floating around, maybe cut a Brutality, maybe cut, I don't know what else you would cut. I think this is the way to do it. And we are in the draw, so maybe we say Nissa's a little too slow on the draw, we want the push. And then you could bring the Nissa back when you're on the play if you need to game 3. So this is my 61. Let's say this is finalized. This is my 61. We cut Nissa when we're on the draw, and we cut the Fatal Push when we're on the play. Seems pretty good. Alright, my friends, we are here on the draw, game 2 against Thing in the Moon, and our hand is good. It is a solid, B+ hand. We have painless mana, a nice balance of lands and spells, and we are naturally insulated against Blood Moon, as well as we can realistically hope to be. 2 basics in the opener is sweet. We have 2 of our absolute best cards in the matchup in the form of Liliana of the Veil and Choke. Liliana specifically being a little bit worse on the draw. The Assassin's Trophies are really nice catch-alls in the matchup. They're very good in the matchup. There are outs to Blood Moon and to Planeswalkers, and to Thing in the Ice, although that's less ideal. The problem with this hand, though, is that it's just very slow on the draw. These would be a nice, again, catch-all out to Blood Moon, but we're already nice against Blood Moon. We don't care about that, and really we don't want to be hitting things early with this, so we don't have much to do in the first couple turns, and that could be very bad on the draw. That said, I think this is still a clear keep. The raw power of the hand is good. It has a very high floor, too. We are not just going to get mooned out of the game, and that is huge. Opponent's going to fetch main phase, which usually indicates a Serum Visions to follow, so as not to mess up their scry down the road. More basics, fine against Moon, not exciting otherwise. Opponent's just going to pass. Scavenging Ooze is a nice draw, so there is an argument still for just saying pass, because we might be, they might be holding up a counter spell of some kind, but I actually like pressuring them with Thing in the Ice. If this trades with anything, it's fine. Remand would have been the worst for us. They didn't remand it. It's totally fine. So if this trades with a burn spell, totally fine. If it traded with a Logic Knot, even better. We want to get the Logic Knots and Mana Leaks out of their hand right now. But they're not going to counter it. They are going to Harvest Pyre it. Harvest Pyre for 2. Fair enough. This also might incentivize them to untap and slam a Blood Moon, which, strangely enough, would be fantastic for us, because then we get to untap and slam Forest into Choke. So, for once in my life, I'm saying please Blood Moon me, but they do not. Alright. So here, this is a really important decision. The Skooz play was a fairly important decision. This is a really important one. So what do we do? Do we slam the Choke or do we slam the Liliana? Well, here's the problem with slamming Choke. So, Liliana is fantastic in the matchup, but Choke has a higher ceiling. Choke can just pretty much end the game against this deck if you find the right window to sneak it in. They, as the game goes on, are going to reach the threshold soon where they have their big 4-mana Haymakers and 5-mana Haymakers that they tap out for. So, we want to make sure the Choke resolves. We make sure it resolves at a good time, and we have a pretty realistic chance to do that. Liliana is a better play right now if she resolves, as well as having a lower ceiling in the matchup. So we don't care as much as she gets countered, and she's actually better here if they don't have a counter, because they could just let the choke resolve, not do anything, keep making land drops, and eventually play their way out of it. So Liliana is the play here because we care less if she gets countered, and she's actually better than choke right now if she does not get countered. Plus, we don't lose our only Lily if she gets countered. We have 2 more to draw to, whereas we just have the 1 of choke. We don't want to throw that away lightly. Looks like they've got something to do. Come on, MTGO, you can do it. There we go. Alright, logic knot for 1. Sure, fair enough. That's one of the reasons we ran out the Skoos early, try to get the knots out of their hand, but they hit the Skoos with the Pyre instead, and they held the knot, and now they can counter the Lily, so that's good for them. Tireless Tracker. Perfect draw here. Perfect draw here because of the exact same evaluation that we just applied to Lily versus Choke now applies to Tracker versus Choke. Again, playing Choke into the untapped lands is pretty bad, because not only can they counter it, but if they don't have a counter, they can keep playing. Like, they're not just choked out of the game. They can make land drops and play out of it. Tracker has the lower ceiling, so we care less if it gets countered, and the higher impact right now if it gets through. Because, of course, we can go fetch land, get 2 clues. However, they do have a play. And yep, it's their best one here, which is Cryptic Command, so pretty good for them. I guess we're still running out this fetch land here. Yeah, so they've answered everything really cleanly. They had the turn 1 Serum, turn 2 removal for the Skoos, turn 3 Logic Knot for Lily, turn 4 Cryptic. Very, very powerful sequence when on the draw as they are. So I'm just saying that so you understand just how, frankly, perfect their sequence was. The only powerful card they haven't seen so far is Blood Moon, really, but again, we were fine against Blood Moon. And now they go straight into their 5-mana Haymaker. This type of sequence from a blue-red control deck, with how powerful it's been, is very, very, very hard to beat for any kind of mid-range deck on the play. Keranos is a card that you do not always see anymore. Used to be a stock one of in the 75 of every URX deck. So blue-red, Jeskai, even Grixis maybe, was always playing this guy. He's fallen a little bit out of favor, but I guess when you're strictly blue-red, it's probably one of the better Haymakers you have access to. I still really like it. I mean, it's indestructible, which is obviously incredible against us, and it is just going to turn their lands into redraws, kind of like our Tireless Tracker does for us, and non-lands into a really fast clock / way to control the board. So very, very, very good card for them at the end of a very good progression, but we get to finally have the window for our choke. So our sequencing has paid off extremely well. They are now choked out of everything but a basic mountain. We get to play a forest, hold up Assassin's Trophy, and pass. Now, if only this wasn't indestructible, we would be very, very good. But they're going to reveal a negate. Solid card in the matchup, but right now it's not castable. And they don't have a land, so they are just operating off a mountain. Alright, we're still happy to leave this fetch land uncracked for all of the usual reasons. And now, we're going to slam the Lily the Last Hope. They have a negate for her, plus 3 other cards in hand, but they cannot use any of them right now. We get to mill over. We were planning to buy back a Tireless Tracker and go on the grindy plan, but I hit a Tarmogoyf off the mill, which is a very interesting one, and I almost just reflexively picked up the Tracker because that was in my plans, but then I see the Goyf and I'm like, you know what? I think we want this Tarmogoyf. They can still get rid of it if they, have a double burn spell turn, but it is the best clock, the most resilient to their removal, And yeah, the Keranos is going to finish us off and, help them hit more draws. We need to end the game while Choke is still really, really powerful. They have nothing. No land again. They just have to pass. Choke is winning us this game, that is for sure. So we tick up the Lily. We crash in for 5. They reveal the Snapcaster Mage. Again, fantastic card in the matchup. Really, really strong. Not doing anything under the auspices of Choke. We'll duress them, see what they've got going on. They've got Entrancing Melody. Interesting card. Yep, they can take control of our Tarmogoyfs is basically what this is for. That's probably their best target on average for it, but they are so far away from doing anything with this, we don't care. Couple Snapcasters in hand. Their hand is stacked. Their progression has been perfect, and we are still getting them because Choke is OP. We take away their only red card, and we'll pass holding up double trophy. We could have played Tracker there, but that's just a free hit to the Keranos. Now, this was an interesting decision from our opponent. Let's just double check to make sure my math is correct. Yeah, so if they had Keranos as any target, they could have hit the Keranos, hit the Tarmogoyf with Keranos and then hit it with the Bolt. That would have gotten the Tarmogoyf off the table, and I think they needed to do that to live because they're on a 2-turn clock, and I don't know what else they think they're going to have off of the top of their deck next turn to keep them alive. So it might have been a missed trick from our opponent. Regardless, we're going to cash in the Liliana. We're going to take back a Scavenging Ooze. We don't need the Tracker anymore. We have another one in hand, and we're not hitting lands. And we're not grinding anymore. We are clocking. So, hit them for 5. If they somehow remove this Tarmogoyf or whatever, we can play 1 Scooze as a backup plan. There's no need to play the other because this one can gobble up the Tracker and the Goyf if they remove it to present exactly lethal. But I don't think there's anything they can have. Yeah, they're going to reveal a Blood Moon. A little late for that one, and like I said, it wouldn't even have... it would have just let us choke them earlier with the way our hand was set up. But, yeah. So, again, not to belabor the point, but just let it sink in how incredible our opponent's progression was. On the play, they go Serum Visions into removal for our Scooze, into Logic Knot for our Lily, into Cryptic Command for our Tireless Tracker, into Keranos, and they still lost, and they lost pretty hard, due simply to the power of Choke. Now, granted, Choke is what did it, but we had to have the Liliana of the Veil, the Tireless Tracker, to draw out their counter magic, and force them to spend it before the Choke came down. And then we had to have plays to follow it up. Lily the Last Hope finding the Goyf was pretty great there. It really put the really turned the screw, really put them under a fast clock, and yeah, they couldn't find their way out of it. So power of Choke, baby, the power of Choke. And we had Assassin's Trophies still chilling in hand. Like I said, they were kind of the weak point of the hand, and they did nothing all game. Now, in a different world, they could have played a Jace. These could have been really relevant. They could have been on the Thing in the Ice plan. We could have needed it to stay alive, etc., etc. Still very fine in the matchup, but they don't line up well against indestructible gods, that is for sure. So, despite having 2 cards dead in hand and 2 cards kind of surplus to requirements, we still pretty cleanly won that game. Choke is a heck of a card. It's starting to become more fashionable. I remember when I was first switching over from green-black to from Absent to green-black a couple months ago now. So I do have a fair amount of experience under my belt with BGX in general, but most of it has been Absent. Anyway, I remember probably, I would say, a majority of BGX players were saying, nah, Choke is too narrow, we don't really want to run that card, which was strange to me because that was when blue-white control was really at its peak. You know, miracles were just really the new hotness at the time, and I continue to think, I thought at the time and I continue to think now that Choke is definitely a card that you want to play. If the meta ever gets really crazy, or maybe your own local meta is really just inundated with traditional blue-based control decks, you could play a second. But I think playing a second's a little much, and I think leaving it out is not good. I think playing exactly one copy of Choke is right where you want to be in the meta, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So feel free to disagree if you have an argument against including Choke. I would love to hear it, but for now, this was a really good showcase of the power of Choke and of intelligent sequencing looking to maximize A, the potential payoff for resolving a Choke, and B, the potential payoff for immediate value if they don't have counter magic. So our sequencing was great game 2. Our discard was really powerful, and our Liliana the Veil was a really powerful game 1. And granted, we had really nice hands and really nice draws for both games, so definitely not trying to take too much credit there. Our deck flowed really, really smoothly throughout. But yeah, strong game. Good game, well played by the opponent. I think they did everything right, except maybe missing the window on Bolt plus Keranos trigger to take care of our Goyf. But that aside, I think we still had the game pretty well sewn up by that point anyway. So, good games, well played. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're enjoying the content, and I will continue to bring you as much as I can, with as high quality as I can. So, thank you for watching, and I will see you for the next one. Have a great day.